Hello and welcome to 7 and 5 Hours Tangle for Solidarity Ukraine edition. Thank you so much for joining us today, whether you're watching this session live or as a recording. In today's session, we'll be immersing ourselves in creating a beautiful Peranakan-inspired tile that commemorates people who have lost their lives in this war, those who are still fighting for freedom, and those who are affected by the war. This tile is a simplified version of the tile that was originally taught by Debbie New at CZT Artifacts Eruditio 2020. So for this session, you're going to need some basic tangling supplies. If you would like, you can set up your table. And if you're in a rush, this session will actually be recorded and it will be made available at 7 Forests 5 Rivers on Instagram and also on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/7f5rstudio. Yeah, Debbie is actually joining me at the studio today, so she can find her on Instagram at tangled.pursuits. Susan is also with us, but she's streaming from her home. You can find her at susanyeo.czt, and you can find me. Hi, I'm Stephanie Jennifer. You can find me at #pen_will_draw. And at the end of this session, if you'd like to post your tile on Facebook to share them with us, you can go to 7F5R Challenge on Facebook. You can search for 7F5R Challenge in Facebook search bar, or you can go to this link, bit.ly/FB7F5R. Yeah? For this session, we'll be using the hashtag Tangle for Solidarity. So if you'd like to post your artworks on Instagram, you can use this hashtag for everyone to be able to find each other's tiles, and so to make it easier for us to comment and also to create a large digital mosaic. Thank you so much for joining us. So like I said, you'll need some basic tangling supplies for this session. Let's go through them together one by one. Your tile that we're going to be drawing on is going to be a 9 cm by 9 cm square. So we are using 7F5R tiles. You can use Zentangle Inks square white tiles, or you can also cut your own tiles to 9 cm by 9 cm or 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Yeah. For your pens, you're going to be using a black micron pen, black drawing pen. I'm using a 05. You can use a 01 if you prefer. You also need a blue pen. So I'm using a blue micron PN. This is just for lettering later on. So if you don't have a blue drawing pen, you can just use a regular blue ballpoint pen as well. You also need a pencil. So I'm using Faber-Castell's Pitt Graphite Matte. If you want to use your own 2B pencil of your choice, that's completely fine. You also need a white pen. We're using a Jelly Roll 10. You can use any white pen that you prefer. And then you also need some coloring supplies. So of course, these coloring supplies will be in Ukraine's flags colors. So those are blue and yellow. So you can see I have a blue and yellow marker for creating my background color. And then I also have some blue and yellow colored pencils for shading later on. So it's just a darker blue and a lighter blue, and then a darker yellow and a lighter yellow. So these are the tangling supplies that you'll need, very simple tangling supplies. And in just a minute, we'll be starting soon. So you might want to clear out your table, see whether you have any clutter on your table, make space for yourself. Yeah. We're going to use this time to keep the people of Ukraine, whether they're within Ukraine or whether they're outside and thinking about their family, worrying about their family. Situation is not the best, but we're going to keep them in our thoughts and send them some loving energy. I want to take a moment to breathe. I want to take a moment to breathe and center yourself. So you're going to take a deep breath in and out. Deep breath in and then back out. One last breath in, and then back out. Alright, adjust your sitting position. See whether you need to maybe sit up a little straighter. Maybe adjust where your hands or feet are. And then with your white tile, we're going to start with our pencil and we're going to create our string. Alright. We are going to draw an X. Let me draw a little darker so that everyone can see it. But remember, with your string, you want to keep it quite light on your own tile. Alright, then next we're going to be creating a frame. So it's kind of like the border in the Zentangle method, right? So 4 corner dots and a border. It's just that we don't have our 4 corner dots today, but we're going to create our border. So you can see I'm turning my tile as I go along. And then from here, we're going to add a wider aura. So the idea with this tile is that we are going to write our words inside this little border here. So you want to have the space be perhaps slightly bigger than one pencil width. Thank you so much for everyone joining us live. We see you in chat. Debbie is actually manning the chat, being my extra pair of eyes. Thank you, Debbie. Good morning to all of you. It's 8:07 a.m. in Singapore on a sunny Saturday morning. Wherever you are in the world, we're so glad to have you here. So you see I've created this border. That's where my words will go. So it can be as wide or as thin as you want. So if you want more space for your words, you can have it be wider. If you want less space for your words, you can have it thinner. Yeah, but mine is just a slightly bit bigger than my pencil width. Alright, so far so good. We're going to then switch to our black pen. Again, I'm using a black Micron 05. You can use a 01 if you prefer thinner lines, thinner strokes, I guess. From here, we're going to draw a circle in the middle of our tile. This will be turned into a gemstone. So depending on the kind of size you want your gemstone to be, and if you're a little worried about drawing orbs, drawing circular shapes, you can of course still draw the shape with your pencil. Yeah, I want to give it a little bezel, a little aura. So depending on how large or how small you want your gemstone to be, you can of course size it up bigger or smaller than I've drawn it. Yeah. The first tangle that we'll be drawing together is a tangle called Hollis. So for those of us who have never drawn Hollis, you practice it together with me. Basically, Hollis is like a very thin muga. So we have this soft curve that double backs in on itself. Yeah. Some people don't like to draw hollis because they find it a little confusing. The way that I try to think of it is kind of like a soft C curve, and then my eyes are tracking the C curve, and then I'm trying to keep my aura as consistent as possible. So that's how I draw a hollis. So where are we going to draw our hollis on our tile? We're actually going to follow this string line that we've made. So if you want to watch what I'm doing, I'm actually looking at this middle point, and my hollis will follow this edge of this string, and then it'll end at this middle point. Then my eyes are tracking the previous C curve that I've drawn, and then going back down. And then we repeat it on the other side to create this kind of heart shape almost. And then we repeat that across all 4 sections of our tile. Because the string essentially does create 4 sections, right? So if, for example, one side of your hollis is bigger than the other, it's perfectly alright. Trust that whatever you create will be beautiful. And then, of course, in some circumstances, your hollis might actually overlap the previous hollis that you've drawn, and that's completely fine as well. Just remember to draw behind. Let pressure on your pen, turning your tile as you go along. And keeping in mind that you're not trying to create perfection or perfect symmetry. Trust in the process and trust that whatever you create will be beautiful. Alright, so far so good. The next tangle that we're going to learn is one of my own tangles. It's a tangle called Unbirthday. The story behind this tangle was that I wanted to gift it to Debbie, and I was like, oh, it can be a birthday present. She was like, but it's not my birthday, it can be an unbirthday present. And then she was like, okay, then name it that lah. Okay.
That was my suggestion.
yeah, that's what I said. You said to me. Yeah. So I was like, okay, name it Unbirthday. So here's how you draw Unbirthday. Unbirthday starts off with this sort of soft kind of fescue or flourish. And then from this point, I aura it down. And then there's a gap over here, this little space. So I close that gap to make it easier for shading later on. And then from this point, we're going to add little, I guess you can call it flux shapes, because it's kind of like a water drop shape, right? And if you notice, I'm drawing each of the humps of the flux shapes slightly shorter than the previous ones. So it creates this very beautiful kind of seashell effect. So for everyone's sake, can you even flip it the other side? I know that some people find it easier drawing it one way rather than the other. That's perfectly fine too. And of course, at any point, if you think, oh, this tangle it's not really my cup of tea, you can of course switch the tangle to a different one, right? So on birthday, we're going to fit it in this little space over here. And I know you might think like, oh, this is quite tight of a space. So what we're going to want to do is, I'm going to spiral mine to the left. You can of course spiral yours in a different direction. But basically, the little flux shapes are going to close this gap. be peeking over my shoulder. So you can of course have your unbirthday spiral in the same direction for each section, or you can have them be alternating if you prefer. It really is up to you. So I'm starting kind of from the middle point, right? Starting from the middle point and then having it touch the other side of the hollis. And then any small spaces, the small gaps that I have, I just fill them in. So for example, over here, you notice I have a tiny little gap there, so I can just fill it in if I want to. You can of course leave it empty as well. Later on we'll be adding colors to our tile. So if you're not really sure what you want to do, you're like, maybe I'll leave this space white, that's completely fine as well. So depending on how tall you've drawn your original hollis, you'll have more or less space for your unbirthday. And then of course, at any point in time you feel like the space is a little too small, you can of course draw behind your hollis, so that affords you a little more space. So we have, for those of us just joining us, a little recap on what we've done. We did string in pencil, so it's an X string, and then we created a border that was about as wide as my pen, so the little space there is about as wide as my micron pen, and then later on we'll be writing inside this little ribbons, little border. And then we added hollis, gemstone first, let's start from there, gemstone first, and then hollis and unbirthday as well. Hello to everyone joining us live, thank you so much for being here with us today. So light pressure on your pen, turning your tile as you go along. Perhaps at this point you want to keep the people of Ukraine in your thoughts as you're tangling. Yeah. So let me just show you Debbie's tile. Debbie, are you using a 01 pen? Yeah, so you can see the difference between Debbie and my tile. So obviously my tangling is a little thicker. If you have a 01 pen, your tangling will look a lot more delicate. So that's a different look. And you can see her hollis has kind of like this ruffled kind of shape. Then she added a little bit of flux to fill in these wider gaps over here. And then if you notice, her hollis actually don't touch each other. They actually have a single tipple, a single orb in the middle here. So very different look. So of course, same class, but depending on what you do with your tile can turn out looking very different. The next thing that we're going to want to do, so you have this little circular shapes over here. Well, they're not quite circular, but you have this space in between your hollis and your unbirthday. We're actually going to, my thought for this class was we're going to turn it into an orb that you can either turn into a gemstone if you prefer, or you can turn it into a circular fragment if you like. So do you see, I'm imagining that this is a circle and I'm adding two lines to create this circular shape with an aura. And then this tiny sliver of space, later on you can either choose to either fill it in with our colored pens, so either blue and yellow depending on your background, or you can fill it in with tangles like tipple or printemps if you prefer. So you're just creating this circular shape. So this class, pardon me, this class is has a very open kind of concept, right? You can choose your own adventure basically. So it's kind of like the gemstone is embedded inside of, behind my hollis. So if you think of, say, a pendant, so the wire is wrapped around this gemstone that's behind this wire, right? So depending on how big your hollis is, of course, your gemstones or your circle fragment will be bigger or smaller, depending on what you have on your tile. So I'm going to show you how it looks. So if I were to put in a fragment, so for example, this fragment, I did this smaller circle with weighted lines going outwards. So it will look like this, yeah, a lot more darker. And then if you want to have gemstones, it's a lot more lighter. So it really depends on what you want to create. Yeah. For those of you all who would want to create a fragment inside your circles, I want to, at this point, sit and think for a little while. What kind of fragment do I want to fill in on my tile? Debbie, are you going to fill in a fragment or? No idea. Alright, so if you're like Debbie and you're considering your options, maybe you might want to leave it as it is for now. And then we're going to add our next tangle to our tile. The next tangle that we're going to draw is Braven Sword. So Braven Sword is one of Debbie's tangles. So it's her tangles, it's not me giving it to her like on birthday. It is her own tangle. One of her newer tangles actually.
It's Brenda's tangle.
Yeah, Brenda's tangle, fair enough. So for Brenda's 69th.
70th.
Well, technically at that point she was still 16. 69th year of life, right? 70th. Okay. Braven Sword. I think I shall teach you guys the original way to draw it. Supposedly it's easier to draw when you've learned the original way to draw it, and then there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. And I can actually show you some examples later on. But Braven Sword has a very lovely story behind it. You can actually go on our blog, 7f5r.com, to actually search for it and read up about the story behind it. I think it's a very meaningful story. So basically, we start off first with 2 circles connected by a line. And then we have this curve that turns into an S curve, and then you connect it to the other side. So if you want, you could actually have 4 of them. Let me see whether I can add to mine. Let me turn my little sketchbook. Here we go. And then we try to have the line pass through this middle point. Yeah. And then you can, of course, embellish it in your own way. So, for example, one of the things I like to do is I like to close the other side. And then it creates this very pretty sort of floral kind of pattern. And then you could, of course, add to this. So at this point, I'm just embellishing it, right? Perhaps even copying that shape that Unbirthday has, right? So here are some examples of the other things that I've done with Braven Sword. Yeah. And then we are going to actually, on our tile, we are going to add Braven Sword to the V points on our tile. So Debbie actually has done a beautiful example of this. So her V point was not quite actually a V point because she used tipple over here. But this is a beautiful like echoing kind of design to it. Thank you, Debbie. Let me zoom you back in for those of you who are a little lost. Let me just draw along with you. So with Braven Sword, for this tile, I'm going to draw a line going outwards with a circle. Another option that I actually have, is to draw a heart shape on it. So if you like hearts, you can actually switch out the circle of Braven Sword into a heart shape. And then remember the border that we have. So if your tile is like mine where you're reaching the border, it's completely fine. You can just draw over that line. And then at this point, how you want to embellish it is really up to you. So in my original class idea, it was just 2 auras. So 2 auras. If you want to do something different, something more special, please go ahead and do that. So I turn my tile, the next V point. So depending on how long your first line, your first stroke is, depending on how tall it is, that would make a difference as to how tall your Braven Sword is. So if you want a shorter Braven Sword, you can have your line be shorter. If you want your Braven Sword to be taller, to fill up more space, you can of course have your line be longer. Alright, let pressure on your tile. Let pressure on your tile. Well, technically that's true. Let pressure on your tile by reducing the pressure on your pen. And then at this point, you might want to bring your awareness to your body, see whether you're straining any parts of your body. Are you slouching forward? Are you gripping your pen really tightly? And then is there pain in your wrist, in your shoulder, in your lower back? Some people hold tension in their jaw. So at this point, I invite you to consciously release that tension in your body. I want to either shake out the tension or maybe put down your pen for a little while and just sort of clench and unclench your hand, your drawing hand, to release some of that tension. Maybe you might want to ever so gently turn your neck to the left and to the right. Turn your head to the left and to the right. Maybe rotate your shoulders a little. Maybe adjust your sitting posture. Yeah. And then if at this point in time you take a little notice of how your drawing is getting along, I can see that this Braven Sword didn't quite line up to my original pencil line, and that's completely okay. Yeah? Like I said at the start of this session, it is not perfection that we're aiming for. It is not perfect symmetry that we're aiming for. We're just tangling and enjoying the process. So I'm just going to bring up my little Braven Sword page. If you'd like to have a little look. Lovely little Tangle. Alright, and then the next step in this tile that we're going to add a little bit of rounding to the edges. So any sharp points that you have between your braven sword and your hollis, you might want to just use your pen to add just a bit of weight to the edges. If you need to, you can turn your towel as you go along. Make sure that your hand is at a comfortable angle. Remember to breathe. Trust in the process. Everything that you create will be beautiful. Are you turning yours into a dingbat, Debbie? Yeah, very pretty. I'm just going to give everyone a little bit more time. Before we move on to one of the last few steps before we switch to coloring and shading our tile. Alright, so after this step we've done most of the basic tangling. Later on we'll be switching to our white pen to add just a bit more tangles to our tile. But for now we're going to want to ink in this little string that we had previously drawn in. So using a pen, you're going to lightly trace it, lightly outline your lines. Just this little box that we have. So I find it easier to draw lines towards myself. I heard that some people find it easier to draw lines away from themselves. So find what is comfortable for you. And my advice is to turn your towel as you go along. And if at any point you feel like, the pencil line isn't quite straight, you can always adjust it as you're doing this. Yeah. And then of course with your braven sword, if it's overlapping your border like mine is over here on these four corners, draw behind your braven sword. Let pressure on your pen. So I have this. I'm going to add an aura to this inner border, so you can either add it to the inside or the outside of it, over here or here. If you feel that your little ribbon area is too wide, you can add your aura to the inside. If you feel it is too narrow, you can add it to the outside instead. I think mine is quite wide, so I'm going to add mine to the inside. So you get a little frame for your tangles basically. Yeah. At this point in time, if the pencil lines you've drawn are too dark, or if they are bothersome to you, you might want to use an eraser to erase them away. Otherwise, you can just leave them as they are. Be careful that you're not erasing over wet ink. I think all of us have at one point smudged our artwork somehow. So be very careful when you're using your eraser. And basically the only reason why I'm asking everyone to erase their lines, their pencil lines, is because we're using colouring materials over it, so we're not using a pencil to add shading to our tile. And when you add, for example, watercolours or for example ink pens over your pencil lines, you essentially lock them onto your paper, so you won't be able to erase them afterwards, right? So it is best to erase them before we add shading to our tile. Yeah? So because this is Tangle for Solidarity Ukraine edition, the colours that we'll be using are blue and yellow. And we're going to have this top half of this tile be blue and the bottom half be yellow to mimic the colour of the Ukraine flag. Yeah? So depending on what medium you're using, I'm going to be using Tombow markers and Dowood Colour soft coloured pencils. So my Tombow markers will be used for my background colour, and then my colour pencils will be used for shading in the gemstones, creating the gemstones rather, and adding shading to my tangles as well. So if you're using watercolours, that's perfectly fine as well. If you're using a different brand of markers, that's great as well. If you're using Lindy's Gang Magicals pigment powders, sure, whatever is right for you, whatever you have on hand. So we're going to be starting first with our blue colouring materials. I'm going to be colouring in my background first. We're going to colour in the top half. So I'm actually turning my tile. This was the correct way up. I'm turning my tile sideways. And then I'm colouring the top half of my tile in blue. So I like to start from the outside and then work my way in. So if you're using watercolours, you might have to use a smaller water brush. Just see if I can put some paper underneath so that I don't accidentally draw on my table. So you would want to go carefully with this. Take your time with it, and then on the opposite half, make sure you mark out where you're supposed to stop. So remember this ribbon that we drew previously, we're going to actually write words in it, so don't colour inside of it, yeah? We are going to colour the background of our tangles. So over here. And then of course on the other side. So if your Braven sword doesn't quite touch your ribbon, you just have to create this artificial line to tell you where is it that you stop filling in your tile with blue ink, right? So it still works the same, just slightly differently. Of course, if you have any questions, Debbie is manning the chat. She can help to answer any of your queries. And of course, if you're watching this as a recording, either on Instagram or on our YouTube channel, we will still look at the comment section, so you can ask the questions there as well. Alright. Once you're done with your blue, you can switch over to yellow. Oh, and for anyone who's interested, I'm using Tombow 535 and 055, pardon me. Tombow 535 and 055. So with your yellow, Initially I used a different yellow for conceptualizing this tile, but then Debbie said that the yellow was too orange. So previously I had used 985, Tombow 985. That was a little too orange, I felt. Debbie still thinks that this yellow is a bit too cold. So it's not quite exactly the right shade of yellow, but it's the closest one in the set that we have. Yeah, and we have the full set, so it's not like we have any other options. It's like, here you go, this is all you have. Make do. So I guess if you're using watercolors, you could probably adjust the color of your watercolors, depending of course on what colors you have in your set. But you could probably get a closer match, I would expect.
But yours is closer than mine. Mine is very warm.
Alright, and then if you notice, remember earlier on we had this tiny pockets of like space. So over here. At this point you might want to fill them in with the colors as well, if you want. If you don't want, they can be left in black and white as well, or you can use your color pencils later on for shading them in. Make sure that you are really looking at where you're filling in with color, because I think it's very easy to accidentally fill in the wrong section. Yeah, so take your time and just really pause for a minute to see like, is this the correct section? And then we would have the Ukraine flag as our background for this tile.
This one you're talking.
Okay. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to wait for the background color to dry. For some of y'all, you might be using water-based material. So for example, Debbie's using koi markers. Yeah, give me without the cap. Trust me a lot. Alright, she is using deep yellow. Do I have a call number? The call number is covered. And aqua blue. So she's using deep yellow and aqua blue.
There are not that many koi brushes though.
There are not
compared
that
to
many.
Tombows.
Yeah, so the selections for koi markers are a lot more limited than Tombow markers. So this is the best that she can do with the markers. And then of course I was going to say she's using a water brush to actually I guess dilute the colors a little to give the background, the blend, to give the background a little bit more gradient, right? So I'm going to, while waiting for this background to dry, because we are going to use our white jelly roll to tangle on the background. While we're waiting for it to dry, I'm going to teach you how to draw gemstones. I'm going to teach you a blue and a yellow one. So you just want a darker blue and a lighter blue. It's not exact science. Let me see. My colored pencils are quite well loved, if I put it gently. So I'm using, I believe it's blue, which is C330, and ultramarine, which is C290. So these are the one color soft colored pencils. The one of course has different lines of beautiful colored pencils, watercolor pencils, as well as the numbers is ultramarine C290 and C330. Yeah, so that one has not only color soft, it has ink pens, watercolor pencils, all sorts of other beautiful colored pencils. So you can of course use different brands, different types of Derwent's color pencils if you have them. I'm going to start from the lower left corner of my gemstone. and then slowly blend my way upwards. So my strokes are small circular strokes, and I am pulling my color upwards. And then it's getting lighter as I am going upwards. The darkest corner would be the edge of my gemstone. I'm going to just add a little bit of darkness to the top right corner of my gemstone. Then I'm switching to my lighter blue. And then blend, 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 blend. My daughter would say color, 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 color. So then we blend downwards, back downwards. And then if you feel like, oh, my gemstone's a little too light, if you notice there's this small white circular shape at the top right corner, I'm not colouring over it to preserve that whiteness of the paper. And then you can layer a second layer of your dark colour on top of your lighter colour, just to make your gradient a little smoother. So that's my blue gemstone. Yellow gemstone, another way that you can do it, so you could of course repeat this with the yellow, so starting with the darker yellow and then switching over to your lighter yellow, making sure that there's a white highlight, and then switching back to your darker yellow at the bottom. You could do that. Another way that I've learned to draw gemstones, this is my darker orange. Darker yellow is basically orange, right? It's not really dark yellow, it's not really a thing. It's very early for me, so forgive me. But basically, I'm not a morning person. Basically, this is the gemstone. You are having this sort of slight C curve over here. So I draw this, I colour over that middle section, and then switching to my lighter colour, I blend, 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 blend. And then the top right corner and the bottom left corner is left white. So this is a slightly different way of drawing it. And then with my white jelly roll, if you like to practice with me, or if you are practicing with me, I usually add 2 white dots on the top, and then a line and a dot at the bottom. So it's kind of like a pearl for this one. This works better for smaller gemstones. So for this example, it might be a little difficult to see it as a proper gemstone, but when it's small, it's very pretty. For this other type, I have a highlight at the top right corner, and then a little line and a dot at the bottom. So here's my other gemstone. Right? So once we're good and comfortable with our gemstones, switching back to our tile. Remember the earlier circles, the small circles over here? I said that you could either have them be circular fragments, or you can have them be gemstones. So it really is up to you on what you choose to create. Again, let me put up the examples on screen. So gemstones, all our gemstones, and then this one has the fragments, so circular fragments. So hello to everyone who is in the live chat. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are adding shading to our tile. For those of you who are tangling along with me, I hope you're alright. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the live chat, or if you're watching this as a recording, you can leave it as a comment and we'll answer them as well. Yeah. So depending on what you choose to do with your tile, really is up to you. Your middle gem can either be blue or yellow. I like mine to be blue because I think that the blue stands out a bit more, and what I like to do is add just a bit of yellow just below my highlight. So of course blue and yellow makes green, so that might be something you like or not like. So decide on what you want for your tile. No right or wrong way to do this. Small circular strokes. Depending on how textured your paper is also, I think that the gemstone will come out looking different. So if your paper is really very textured, it will take a lot more layers of colored pencils to make your gemstone look smooth. If you did watercolors for your background, your tile may or may not be dry, so just be careful, don't smudge your beautiful work. Remember to breathe as you're doing this. Pay attention to how your body is, how you're sitting. Maybe pay attention to where your thoughts are. And also, another thing I'd like to point out, if you want to just look up for a little while, remember the blue and yellow background that we did with the half line? So this bottom section, if you're doing all of them as gemstones, the top gemstones will of course be blue, and then the bottom would be yellow. Of course, that's not a rule. Maybe if you want to do alternate blue, yellow, that's doable as well. Perfectly okay. And then with coloured pencils, I also feel that adding more light layers is better than drawing, shading really, really dark on the first go. I think that you get more nuances when you add light layers, and then your colours also seem, I don't know, more delicate, brighter maybe. Right, so that's my gemstone. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit more time, and then we'll be moving on to shading our tangles. I'm sad that Susan is not at studio with us, because I would love to see what she's creating. I would love to see what you guys are creating as well. So if you'd like to post your tile on Instagram after this session, the hashtag is #TangleForSolidarity. Here's Debbie's tile. It's still a little wet.
Yeah,
I just touched. No. Yeah, so it's very pretty, kind of like little berries. And then she says that she didn't quite follow the color scheme. But I think it still looks very, very pretty. Yeah. So of course your tile will look different to mine, different to Debbie's, depending on what you chose to do with your tile. Yeah. Debbie's ahead of us as well, because we're not done with shading our tangles yet. Yeah. So I'm still sticking to my colored pencils, and we're going to shade our tangles. I'm going to shade the blue part first. So the thing that I like for you to notice is that this Braven sword over here and here actually they're kind of half in the yellow, half in the blue. So if you want to have one shade that's blue, one shade that's yellow, that's doable as well. If you want to have just both shaded blue or both shaded yellow as well, that's fine as well, right? So it really depends on what you want to do. So with Braven sword, I usually shade this point because I have this little detailing. Right, I shade the points where the lines converge. I'm starting with my dark blue, and then later I'll switch to my light blue. And then with Unbirthday, of course I haven't done the lower half in yellow yet, but Unbirthday also has these two that sort of share a space between the yellow and the blue. So how you choose to shade that is really up to you as well. So with Unbirthday, I like to shade this bottom part where it's the initial first shade, and then the Flux shape, I shade the points. So typically the shading goes a little higher on those parts of the flux, right? As compared to the initial first shade, the shading is a little lower. So once I've done all the blue shading, I turn my tile, and then I can shade all of the yellow sections. So there's no exact right or wrong way to shade. It's just what you feel looks best. So if you think, I've drawn my Braven sword differently from how Stephanie has drawn hers, maybe I can shade mine a slightly different way, that's completely fine as well. If you have any sort of glitter pens or gold pens or even silver pens as well, you could, of course, like Debbie did, she added colors to the circle points, the orbs of her Braven sword, or maybe you've drawn a heart shape, I don't know. So you could use an accent color just to add a little more details to your tile. That's doable. Don't forget to also shade your Unbirthday in yellow. Alright, and at this point, I want to take a little step back, hold your towel out at arm's length, maybe turn it this way and that way, see whether you've missed out anything that you need to be shading. We are going to, in a moment, be switching to our white jelly roll. And we're going to be adding one last tangle to the background of our tile. Okay. Did I have to show that? Okay, I'll use Debbie's tile to show you guys. Basically, the last tangle that we're going to draw, one of a lot of people's fan favorite, right? Printemps means spring in French. It's one of the first few tangles we learn when we attend introduction to the Zentangle method class with a certified Zentangle teacher. So you can see she's done hers in white, right? A very small detail, but I think it adds some texture to the tile. The darker your background is, actually the more it will show up, right? So if you compare Debbie's tile to, for example, one of my example tiles, you can see this blue is really dark compared to hers. So you can see my Printemps my Printemps shows up a lot more. Debbie's saying it's also the pen, yeah. So if your white pen is very opaque, it will of course show up a lot more. And of course, if you don't like the subtle look to it, if you want to use, like, I don't know, gold jelly roll perhaps, yeah, you can do that as well. So Printemps, for those of us who need refreshers, or maybe you've not learned Printemps before, start with a point, then you spiral outwards. When you feel it's large enough, you close. And then say you want to give it a friend. When you reach a previous line, you stop, draw behind, stop, draw behind. So you're imagining that the line goes behind the first one. Depending on how you draw your Printemps, it can look very different. So if you have your lines very tightly wound together, it'll look darker. If you had your lines more widely spaced apart, it'll look lighter. So you can see these are the same size, but they look very, very different, right? You could, of course, use different shapes. I don't know, whatever floats your boat. Maybe you want a triangular printom or a square printom. That works as well. I'm using a Jelly Roll 10. You can use whatever white pen you prefer, or you can even use the Jelly Roll 08. Oh, I've started tangling in the blue section first. If you are following me, later on between tangling on this blue section and tangling on the yellow section, you might want to clean out your white pen by scribbling a little bit on some scrap paper. Because what I found is that the Jelly Roll does pick up the color of my Tombow marker, and then if you, of course, blue is a lot darker of a color than yellow, and if you tangle on the yellow, the color transfers. So if that's not something that you want, you might just want to clean out your Jelly Roll before you tangle on the yellow section. Alright, there's no method to this, no formula to it. If you feel like this section needs a bit more printom, you can add more. If you feel like this section is a bit tight for space, I don't want to draw that many printoms, that's perfectly fine as well. If you want to fill up the entire section with printom, you can do that too. If you want to fill up the border with printom, you can do that as well. That is completely up to you. And then remember the little tiny sections that we filled in with color. If you want to add some printom in those parts, you could as well. And then once we're good and ready to tangle on our yellow section, you're going to just want to get some scrap paper, scribble a little bit, make sure that your Jelly Roll pen is clean before you start tangling on the lighter section. Pressure on your pen, even if you're using a Jelly Roll and doesn't have a fragile nib like the Micron does. It's still good practice to just make sure that you're not holding any tension within your body. At this point in time, I also like to bring our awareness back to why we are having this session. Tangle for Solidarity, Ukraine edition. I'm quite sure you're helping in as many ways as you can, with as much resources as is available to you. Yeah. And today we're coming together just to keep the people of Ukraine in our thoughts. And at this point, we have completed our tangling. So you're going to want to switch back to a black Micron pen and then just add your initials to the tile. So I'm going to add it in a small corner. So I've purposely chosen to add my initials on the blue side of my tile so that it doesn't stand out too much. Your initials will of course look different from mine, so how you choose to add it to your tile would be a personal choice, right? And how it will fit best within your tile will, of course, be different from mine. After this, you're just going to give your tile one last look over, see whether there are any points in your tile that need a little bit of adjusting. And then the very last step that we have for this session would be to add some well wishes along the border of our ribbon. So here are some examples. So up top, I invite everyone to write Tangle for Solidarity, which is the title of today's class. And then along the other three sides, you can actually write positive words for this session. So for example, on this tile I've wrote nurture, peace, hope, joy. On this tile I've wrote family, friends, home, unity and hope. This one says freedom, peace, freedom, peace, persist and joy. And then here's another one. This one says strength over here. So this was actually one of my earlier class conceptualizations where the yellow was a little too orange. Yeah. So depending on your hopes for Ukraine, right, you might also choose to use your pencil to sort of gauge how large you need your words to be, right? Because sometimes we might underestimate or overestimate how much space is needed, right? So again, you write Tangle for Solidarity at the top, and then in the other three sections, you can write your own positive words. Of course, your words will be different from the ones that I've chosen, or maybe they'll be the same. Maybe you have similar hopes for Ukraine as I do. And of course, I'm writing it in a sort of cursive script. But if you want to write it in a type font, that's perfectly okay as well. I apologize for turning my tile so often. I know that makes some people have a little bit of motion sickness. But I think most of us should be done with tangling. And if you aren't, that's perfectly fine as well. You can of course complete your tile in your own time. And again, I invite everyone to post their tile on Instagram using the hashtag Tangle for Solidarity. And if you would like to also share it in our Facebook group 7F5R Challenge, that would be great as well. But the great thing about Instagram's hashtags is then it creates kind of like a digital mosaic, right? Where you can see everyone's artwork together. And I think the idea of a mosaic is a very powerful one where you can see, especially with online classes, right? It kind of feels isolating when you can't really see the people that you're tangling with. So to have that mosaic is actually a very helpful thing to have, to see that you can have everyone's tiles together, and then you've tangled together for this time, right? And of course, if you need to rewatch any parts of today's session, the recording will be available on our Instagram at 7 Forests 5 Rivers, and also on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/7f5r studio. Yeah, so you can rewatch any parts that you want, or perhaps you want to make a second tile with different tangles, or with an idea that popped into your head as you were sitting for this session. Yeah, you can find Team 7F5R on Instagram as well. Debbie is at tangle.pursuits, Susan is at susanyeo.czt, and I am at halfpen_will_draw. Yeah, you can find the 7F5R challenge on Facebook, either by searching 7F5R challenge in Facebook's search bar or going to this link directly. Yeah. If you have any questions, please leave them in chat. If you're watching this session live, or if you're watching a recording of today's session, you can of course leave them as comments in the comment section below. Here is Debbie's completed tile. So you can see we attended, or I should hope we attended the same class. She's sitting right next to me. She went on her own little journey, so she did different things to it, to her tile. Yeah, I can see she's added some highlights, which we've actually forgotten on our tile. So if you want to add some highlights to your gemstones, you can of course do that. Yeah. If you use watercolors and your tile isn't quite dry, so you've had a little bit of lag in completing your tile, that's completely fine as well. Please draw in your own time. And once you've completed your tile, please post them on Instagram with the hashtag #TangleForSolidarity. I also invite you to sign the back of today's sign the back of your tile and write today's date on it, so that you can remember this very meaningful session that you attended. Yes, we see everyone on live chat saying thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We would like to say thank you to you too. We hope that you enjoyed today's session, mindful session, Tangle for Solidarity Ukraine edition, for those of you who are writing down on the back of your tile today's title, right? And we hope to see you again sometime soon. Team 7F5R streams live every Wednesdays, 2:45 p.m. Singapore time, and all of the sessions are recorded and made available on our Instagram and also on our YouTube channel. We also stream every alternate Monday at 2:45 p.m. Yeah, we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much for joining us, and we very much look forward to seeing all of your tiles in the hashtag #TangleForSolidarity. See you again soon. Bye.